Call of Duty might have lied to us about skill-based matchmaking being removed from Black Ops 7. A lot of players are already suspicious that skill-based matchmaking is still active despite what Treyarch announced, so share this with your friends so they know what to look for. We were told that Black Ops 7 would launch with an open playlist that barely considers skill and a standard playlist that keeps skill-based matchmaking. The problem is that players are noticing a big difference between the difficulty of lobbies you get through the open playlist quick match button and the lobbies you get when you select the open playlist single modes below it, like Mosh Pit. The theory from people on X like Ghost of Hope is that skill-based matchmaking does not apply when you pick specific open modes directly, but if you use the quick match selection tab, those lobbies feel much tougher and might mean skill-based matchmaking is still active in there, either by accident or on purpose without telling us.
You can hate the campaign, you can hate the skibbity boss fight at the end, you can hate the AI, but at the end of the day, 30 million people will still buy this game. And they know that. That's why they get so lazy and do everything for as cheap as possible. It's just gonna sell. So who cares what it is? They could literally release this game with nothing but placeholders in everything except the multiplayer, and people will still pay for it, and it will still sell 30 million copies. No matter what, Call of Duty legitimately is too big to fail. There will never come a Call of Duty that actually flops anymore. Vanguard is like the closest thing to a flop, and that still sold, I think it was 25 million copies. Let me see. I'm going off memory, so I could be wrong. Call of Duty Vanguard sold, nope, 30 million copies. Still 30 mil. Like, it truly, like, again, does not matter what they do. It's too big to fail. It's a yearly cycle. They'll support it for a couple months, and then it's right on to the next one. They don't give a f***. Just fart it out every year. Sell 30 million copies. Who cares if they drop it in a month or two?
Now, before you start going crazy about Call of Duty, look, we might play the game. I don't know. I don't feel like playing it right now. In Arc Raiders, if you guys haven't played it, chat, I'm telling you, man, this is no hashtag ad. You gotta get on the game, man. It's really good.
The PC community is gigantic these days, and there are way more PC gamers than console gamers worldwide. Plus, Steam is the biggest distribution service for PC games. So if a game is struggling on Steam, it's pretty safe to assume it's struggling elsewhere as well. And when I say Black Ops 7 is struggling on Steam, I mean that in the most honest, blatant way that I can. I'm looking at Steam charts on the morning of November 14th. It's launch day for Black Ops 7. And these are the times when the player count should be super high, spiked up. True. Because everybody has been online since last night, and all the die-hard fans are taking off work today to play.
What if the biggest franchise in FPS gaming has been slowly rewriting its own rules right under everyone's nose? What if the at-launch promise everyone celebrated was never a promise at all, just a quiet loophole waiting to explode? For years, players joked about having Call of Duty-induced PTSD, but this time, that phrase doesn't feel like a joke anymore. Because Black Ops 7 didn't just stir up old frustrations, it exposed something deeper, something fans didn't expect to see so openly. And the wildest part? The signs were right in front of us long before the backlash hit. Call of Duty has always been a strange combination of comfort food and chaos. No matter how many times it disappointed players, millions came back for more. So when Black Ops 7 began teasing a return to classic matchmaking, the entire community finally breathed for the first time in years. It sounded too good to be true, like the franchise had listened, learned, and changed. The beta felt smoother, fairer, and actually fun in a way most players hadn't felt in over half a decade. Lobbies stayed together, new players weren't getting vaporized in seconds, and longtime fans weren't being shoved into sweat pits designed to keep little Timmy glued to mom's credit card. But something about the announcement felt almost too polished. Every description had a specific phrasing, repeated just enough times to get stuck in your head. At launch, not forever. Not in general, just those two tiny words that most players skim past without thinking. And that tiny detail would end up being the spark that blew the entire thing open. The deeper you look, the stranger it becomes. Activision didn't say classic matchmaking would remain. They didn't say it was locked in. Instead, they repeated at launch like it was a legal disclaimer whispered under their breath. To most people, it sounded harmless, a formality, something you'd ignore the same way you ignore an app's terms of service. But for players who had lived through years of SBMM manipulation, weird lobby swings, rigged feeling matches, and skill cages disguised as features, the wording hit differently. A lot of players brushed off that paranoia as overthinking, until the announcement 2 days before release. That's when everything snapped. Suddenly, the standard matchmaking they hyped for months became the majority of playlists. And suddenly, there was a rotating mosh pit where skill was an important consideration. The kind of phrasing you use when you're trying to introduce something quietly and hope nobody asks too many questions. It was like watching a magician reveal the hand that was hiding the card the whole time. The community immediately recognized it. The lie wasn't the surprise. The surprise was how boldly they slid it in after everyone had already paid. And that's when people realized This wasn't an accident. It was calculated. The reaction wasn't shock, it wasn't confusion, it was exhaustion. Because it wasn't the first time, just the latest chapter in a pattern players are all too familiar with. Year after year, Activision pushes some flashy promise, waits for the hype to peak, and then quietly bends the rules when nobody's looking. Fans dug up receipts immediately. Memories of Black Ops 6's accidental dark pattern menus, Modern Warfare's unexpected store pushes, Cold War's silent playlist swaps, and the infamous white paper that justified strict matchmaking over a microscopic retention difference, something players had been calling nonsense since the day it dropped. The timing wasn't random, the wording wasn't random, and the last-minute shift wasn't random. The reaction wasn't shock, it wasn't confusion, it was exhaustion. Because it wasn't the first time, just the latest chapter in a pattern players are all too familiar with. Year after year, Activision pushes some flashy promise, waits for the hype to peak, and then quietly bends the rules when nobody's looking. Fans dug up receipts immediately. Memories of Black Ops 6's accidental dark pattern menus, Modern Warfare's unexpected store pushes, Cold War's silent playlist swaps, and the infamous white paper that justified strict matchmaking over a microscopic retention difference, something players had been calling nonsense since the day it dropped. The timing wasn't random, the wording wasn't random, and the last-minute shift wasn't random. It felt like the franchise had turned manipulating players into a business model. What made this one sting even more was how openly excited the community had been. For once, people let themselves hope. Even critics who hadn't praised the series in years admitted the beta felt promising. It felt like Activision was finally breaking a cycle, but as history has shown, nothing in this franchise changes without a loophole attached. And this time, that loophole was the at-launch line everyone ignored, until it was too late. But the story wouldn't stop there, because the real twist happened when fans looked closer at the update, specifically the wording. Activision didn't expect anyone to analyze.
That's my bold prediction here. That's the crazy Baba Vanga Charles White predictions for the next Call of Duty, the next handful of Call of Duty. I think the future of Call of Duty is going to be mainly AI driven, where they're going to look to cut even more corners and squeeze even more money out of this franchise for even less effort. I'm not super surprised to see that they've already, intertwined AI art with Black Ops 7, and I think it's only going to get more and more egregious. So yeah, I think the state of Call of Duty is pretty pathetic and pretty embarrassing, but again, no ill will to anyone that is enjoying it. If you're having fun, all power to you. I just wanted to showcase a little wackiness here from Black Ops 7. A lot of quirkiness from Black Ops 7 here. Anyway, that's really about it. See ya.
It wasn't the announcement itself that caused the biggest wave, it was one single word embedded inside it. Similar, not identical, not the same, just similar. That one word blew the doors open wide. It implied that the matchmaking players fell in love with during the beta wasn't guaranteed to survive. Even if skill was minimally considered, that gave Activision a massive range of wiggle room behind the scenes. And veterans knew exactly how that loophole gets used. Subtle changes, invisible tweaks, quiet adjustments that warp matchmaking without anyone being able to prove it, something the franchise has been accused of doing for years. So, when fans saw similar, it set off alarm bells. If they weren't willing to say the same, what were they hiding? That question alone sparked an entire meltdown on Twitter, Reddit, and Discord. Players began posting screenshots, comparing quotes, dissecting phrases like they were analyzing legal contracts. And honestly, they weren't wrong to act that way. When a company uses loopholes this often, people start reading every word like it's written in invisible ink. And what came next only proved those instincts right. Because in the middle of the backlash, Activision posted a clarification that made the situation even weirder. The clarification was meant to calm the community, but it did the opposite. Activision doubled down, claiming every open playlist would treat skill the same way as the beta. But in the same breath, they introduced something called Standard Mosh Pit, a name that completely contradicted everything they'd said before. If open matchmaking was the new standard, then why was the SBMM heavy playlist labeled standard? Why did the playlist designed for fair matchmaking get such a neutral name, while the fun, open one was framed as a majority instead of a guarantee? Those weren't accidents. Names aren't chosen randomly. That phrasing made it clear the plan wasn't to keep open matchmaking forever. It was to frame it as temporary, then gradually push it aside as the year progressed. Players recognized the pattern instantly. They'd watched it happen every other year, a slow shift, a quiet swap, and then the infamous moment where open matchmaking becomes the minority instead of the majority, the classic bait and switch. And the worst part? Most players already expected it. because deep down, they knew Activision wasn't bringing back classic matchmaking out of passion. It was because Battlefield, Arc Raiders, and GTA 6 were putting pressure on them for the first time in years. But here's where the story really turns bizarre. Because just as people were dissecting the matchmaking mess, another controversy popped up. One that hit directly at the heart of nostalgia. Right when the community was already furious, new reports emerged that some of the iconic Black Ops 2 camos being remastered in Black Ops 7 weren't actually remastered at all. They were AI upscaled, and not subtle either. Textures warped, details blurred, patterns distorted. For a franchise built on nostalgia, this was the worst thing they could have done. Players weren't just upset, they were offended. It felt lazy, cheap, and tone-deaf. Especially after months of talk about respecting fan heritage, the fact that these mistakes were found through close-up texture analysis made the entire situation feel even more embarrassing. It was the exact opposite of what the community wanted. Instead of honoring classic content, Activision had cut corners in the most obvious way possible, and if the goal was to rekindle trust, this decision did the complete opposite. But this wasn't the final blow, not even close, because what came next pushed the community to a point it hadn't reached in years. As the community dug deeper, something unexpected started happening. People who had defended Call of Duty for years, people who never skipped a release, people who bought every operator bundle, every battle pass, every pre-order bonus, suddenly stopped making excuses. It was like the illusion cracked all at once, because this time, the pattern wasn't subtle. It wasn't tucked behind corporate jargon or vague promises. It was out in the open, clear as day. A company claiming to listen to feedback while simultaneously slipping in the exact system players begged them to remove. And the deeper fans looked, the more they found. Screenshots of GameStop employees revealing shockingly low pre-order numbers. Discords filled with veterans who had never skipped a launch, suddenly saying they weren't touching this. One longtime creators who built their careers around Call of Duty, publicly admitting they were burned out, numb, or just flat out done. It wasn't just anger anymore, it was apathy. And for a franchise that relies on hype more than innovation, apathy is far more dangerous than outrage ever could be. Because if people stop caring, the entire machine collapses. Every time Call of Duty stumbles, there's a familiar cycle. Backlash, denial, excuses, corporate speak, then some vague promise to improve communication moving forward. But this time, something was different. Players didn't believe the excuses. They didn't fall for the defensive tweets. They didn't trust the clarifications. They didn't buy the claims that the community had misinterpreted things. Instead, they called every line for what it was, damage control. And for the first time in years, that pushback was united. Black Ops 7 wasn't launching into a fractured community. It was launching into a community that, for once, agreed on something. The franchise had crossed a line. A line built on years of manipulation, quiet nerfs, silent matchmaking tweaks, and decisions driven more by monetization than passion. People weren't just questioning the game, they were questioning the people behind it. And when that happens, the conversation shifts from fix this to why do you do this in the first place? That kind of shift is the beginning of the end for any franchise, unless something truly massive changes. What makes this moment different isn't just Activision's missteps, it's that players finally have options, real options. Battlefield 6 dropped with some of the strongest launch numbers the series has seen in a decade. Arc Raiders stepped into the FPS space with a style players didn't expect. And looming behind all of this is the monster, GTA 6, with online modes so massive that every shooter is bracing for impact. For the first time in 15 years, Call of Duty isn't the obvious choice. It's just one option among many, and the more Activision clings to outdated systems, manipulative mechanics, or AI shortcuts, the faster players drift toward games that simply feel honest. Not perfect, not flawless, but honest. Battlefield 6 isn't pretending to be something it's not. Arc Raiders isn't forcing matchmaking that manipulates player psychology. Even older games, revived modded communities, and indie shooters are gaining traction because players just want to play, not fight a casino algorithm disguised as a matchmaking system. Call of Duty was built on instinct, chaos, and fun. But the more corporate the design becomes, the more sterile the experience feels. And players can feel that shift. They feel it every time the game quietly adjusts their lobbies. Every time challenges push them toward the store instead of gameplay. Every time the nostalgia they loved is reduced to an A upscaled texture pack. The cracks are widening, and this time, the competition is ready to fill every gap. Behind the scenes, something else is happening. Developers, actual devs, not executives, have been hinting for years that the issues players hate aren't entirely in their control. Decisions about monetization, decisions about matchmaking, decisions about content pacing. All of it flows down from higher up. And the higher up you go, the further you get from the actual player experience instead of focusing on gameplay, passion, or innovation. The franchise revolves around spreadsheets, retention metrics, and whatever will keep casual players spending the longest. That's why certain features must exist. That's why matchmaking needs to consider skill. That's why microtransactions push harder every year, and cosmetics cost more with each release. It's not about what makes the best game, what keeps the system profitable. The tragedy is that the developers who actually care, the ones who grew up on the franchise, are stuck building a game inside a cage of corporate rules. Some of them speak out anonymously, others talk through cryptic tweets, some leave the company entirely, but the message is always the same. The soul of Call of Duty is being smothered by the people in suits, and players are starting to see that truth for themselves. The most shocking part of this entire meltdown wasn't the matchmaking controversy. It wasn't the AI camos. It wasn't the last-minute playlist shifts. It was how many people finally said, enough. Players who once defended the franchise through thick and thin began walking away. Not loudly, not with outrage. Quietly, calmly, almost peacefully. And that's when you know a franchise is in trouble, because passionate anger can be reversed. Outrage can be fixed. Bugs can be patched. Bad decisions can be walked back. But apathy? You can't patch apathy. When players stop expecting anything from you, you've already lost them. And if Black Ops 7 launches into that atmosphere, an atmosphere of distrust, exhaustion, and frustration, even huge content drops and nostalgic remasters won't save it. Because for the first time in its history, Call of Duty is competing with players' habits, their tastes, their memories, their desire for something new, and nostalgia alone isn't enough to carry that fight. There are two paths ahead. One path is ugly. It's the path where Activision doubles down, pushes more SBMM-heavy playlists, quietly shifts open matchmaking into a corner, and continues relying on manipulative systems to try and squeeze out every last dollar. If they choose that path, the decline won't be dramatic. It'll be slow. A drip of players leaving every month, a gradual erosion of hype, a shrinking base until the franchise becomes a shadow of itself. The other path is harder. It's the path where the company admits, even indirectly, that it misread the room, where they walk back decisions, reduce the psychological manipulation, focus on gameplay first, and rebuild trust instead of exploiting it. It would take humility, transparency, and a willingness to let go of systems they've depended on for years. Will they do it? History suggests no. But the community isn't powerless. For the first time ever, players are choosing with their wallets, not their nostalgia. They aren't pre-ordering blindly. They aren't jumping in just because it's COD. They're looking elsewhere and liking what they see. The franchise that once felt unstoppable now feels vulnerable, and vulnerability can change everything. Maybe the real story of Black Ops 7 isn't the matchmaking, or the AI camos, or the marketing tricks. Maybe the real story is the moment players finally saw the pattern clearly and refused to pretend it wasn't there. If this franchise wants to survive the wave of competition coming in 2025, it can't rely on half-truths, last-minute changes, or nostalgia bait. It needs something it hasn't shown in a long time. Respect for the players who built it. Because in the end, the matchmaking controversy wasn't the fall of Call of Duty, it was the warning shot. A sign that the community won't settle for manipulation disguised as innovation, or similar to the beta disclaimers meant to soften the blow. The real question now isn't about Black Ops 7. It's about Call of Duty's future. Will the franchise finally rebuild trust, or will it keep pushing until the community walks for good? Only time will tell. Until then, the players are watching, and this time, they're not looking away.